Senator McAllister. Senator Rice.
Thank you. Yes, I want to go to the Commonwealth spending on capital spending, and in particular Table 1 on page 411 of budget paper number 1. And thanks for that table, very useful guide to the Commonwealth's capital investment. And also noting the words there, encouraging words about the importance of government investment in infrastructure and the desirability of investing in productive infrastructure. So I wanted to first get clarity about what the department classifies as productive infrastructure.
Yeah, I might even turn to Mr McKissack to come to the table, but basically what is outlined in Table 1 is essentially 3 categories of capital spending, which might be a bit broader than infrastructure per se. So there are these 3 categories of direct capital investment, which is effectively asset investment, which will appear on the government's balance sheet. So that would include everything, would include ICT investments by government departments, for example, but it would also include defence equipment and the like, things that the Commonwealth will own. The second category is capital grants, and that's where, and when we may even need to take on notice precisely which capital grants we've taken account of in this, but they are essentially things like the infrastructure investment program, payments to the states for things like road and rail, but I just have to check on what other categories are in there. And the third is financial asset investment, which is essentially the use of, for want of a better term, the use of the Commonwealth's balance sheet, so instances where the government might borrow to fund via an equity investment or a concessional loan assets, which again will sit potentially on the Commonwealth's broader balance sheet or someone else's, and that would include things like Western Sydney Airport, the NBN and the like. But it's broader probably than just infrastructure, so it would also include those investments in financial assets for policy purposes, which is the element in the cash flow statement from which this is derived, would include things like help loans and the like as well. So it's a broad capital, broad conception of capital investment, if you like, or asset investment, as distinct necessarily all from infrastructure. But I'll check if that's all right, just what we've got included in that second category.
Yeah, look, I wanted to go to that. I mean, the other sort of preliminary question I've got is in the conclusion on page 415. It says that Commonwealth borrowing is funding investments that add to the productive capacity of the economy, in contrast to recurrent spending is being funded through recurrent revenue. I just wanted to check, does that mean that all of that capital spending, or what proportion of that capital spending is being funded through borrowing?
Yeah, so not absolutely all of the capital spend is funded through borrowing either, because in essence, by virtue, over the forward estimates, because of the fact that the budget's returning a surplus by 2021, for example, it implies that there is some effectively, the cash surplus is effectively covering, recurrent cash is effectively more than covering the recurrent spend, and it's partly funding the capital spend as well.
Well,
in fact, it's fully covering the capital spend in that.
Could you take on notice then as to sort of what proportion of that capital spending that's in that table is funded through borrowings and what's covered through the cash surplus? Yeah. All right, and so look, I did want to go to what proportion of this capital spending is in fact on infrastructure, and I tabled a document which you should have, which was tabled in infrastructure estimates of the Department of Infrastructure last week, that showed that the Commonwealth investment in transport infrastructure per year was around $8.5 billion. So,
Senator Rice, can I just clarify that the committee is happy to table that document? Yes.
Great. Thank you, Chair. So it's showing the level of investment in transport infrastructure is rounding off 8.6, 8.7, 8.2 and $8.5 billion per year over the forwards. So I want to compare that with what's shown in Table 1, which over the forwards has got the total investment in capital spending of between 46 and $40 billion.
Yep.
So in fact, which is only 20% on average of the government's capital spending. So I just wanted to tease out basically what the rest is. So, and firstly, so we've got, am I right then, and from your description of those columns, I think I am, that this transport infrastructure spend is mostly, it's included under capital grants and in financial asset investment.
Yeah, predominantly in the capital grants. The financial asset investment would include things like Melbourne to Brisbane Inland Rail, for instance, but the vast bulk would be in the capital grants component.
Right, and so there wouldn't be any of it in that direct capital investment, so that direct capital investment, as you said, is military and government, yeah.
Yeah, in the transport space, other than if you regard Western Sydney Airport, for example, as a transport project, well, again, that's actually that's a financial asset investment as well. So no, in the direct capital investment, there's not a lot of transport infrastructure, it's fair to say. Yeah.
So it's included in the capital grants and financial asset management.
Yep.
But even then, it's still a relatively small proportion of those. So I did want to explore what the rest of those programs are.
Yeah, so we'll take that on notice if that's all right, Senator. So essentially it's the gap between for example, in 1819, you've got here, your total is around 8.6 billion for effectively the things like the infrastructure investment program, financial assistance grants and the like, as compared with our capital grants line, which is more like 11.5 billion.
That's right. So it's only but in fact some of that 8.6 is also equity investment. Some of the approximately 8 billion, so it's included in both. So there's quite a bit of unknown. So
Sure.
So if you could provide for me then a breakdown of those three capital streams according to program and portfolio.
We can do our best.
Okay, good.
I think we can certainly put a bit more detail on the capital grants because they're really coming somewhere out of budget paper 3. They're really some payments typically to the states that are of a capital nature, and they're just a little bit broader than the IIP.
I mean, I'm also interested with the direct capital investment and what proportion of that is military spending compared with the other investment, and and the financial asset management.
Yep.
So yes, if by program and portfolio, because to account for that other 80%, because I think when people think of capital spending, they will think of the spending on transport infrastructure, and that's what everyone's mind goes to.
Yep.
And yet it's pretty clear that it's only 20% of that capital spending.
That's right. I mean, there will be, particularly in 1890, there'll be some significant things like the NBN, because there's a significant debt facility going to the NBN in the 1819 year, and a couple of other significant things like that. So, but yeah, we'll see what we can put together.
Okay, thank you.